These are the things that, as a chief examiner, I find really frustrating, because you've got brilliant students who are working really, really hard, taking the effort of handing their assignment in or their OBE in on time, and then they get something so basic wrong. I can't mark your paper, or I can't pass you, and it's very frustrating from my point of view. And I'm sure if you've put all that work and effort in, it's very frustrating to end up not passing because of something that's very, very silly. So get these bits right, and you're setting yourself up for success. So first of all, in every paper we require an organisational summary. It's simple, do one. If you don't write an organisational summary, you will get an automatic fail. And what that means is I will look through your paper to see whether there is an organisational summary anywhere. And if there's not, I don't read the rest of the paper. I don't mark it, because it's an automatic fail. In the last marking session in June, I failed 2 papers purely because they didn't have an organisational summary. And it's such a ridiculous thing to not get a pass mark or to fail your paper on, because it's very brief. It's 200 words maximum. It tells you what we need from you. We need the name of your organisation, its size, some information about the market where it operates, examples of products and services, who the key competitors are, and the main customer segments. Now you might wonder, why is that a reason to fail a paper? Well, you will have noticed that all of our assignments and all of our open book exams are all about applying what you know to an organisational setting. So as an examiner, I need to know what the organisational setting is, so it makes sense to me when I'm reading your answers. You can include further information, but it's all about me understanding the context in which you're going to be setting your answers. So first rule, do one. Do an organisational summary. You must do one, otherwise you will automatically fail. The next is word count. Stick to it. Very simple rules. If you think writing reams and reams of paper will give you some kind of advantage, it doesn't. We stop marking after you reach the tolerance. So if it's 3,000 words as your word count limit, your submission can't be more than 3,300 words. We will stop marking after 3,300 words. I can instantly tell when I open up a paper whether someone has thought that adding lots and lots of writing is going to get them a better grade, because it's too long. There's too many pages. So don't write more than you need to. And I'm going to show you through this presentation how you can score lots of marks just by writing a couple of sentences and a few paragraphs. So you don't need to write reams, you just need to be very succinct in what you do write and writing the right things. So this will help you to do that. So don't write lots, stick to the word count, because once you reach it, we stop marking and there will be a line drawn and saying over the word count, and anything you've written after that we ignore, which may mean that you'll have tasks that will get no marks because you've already reached it in your first 2 tasks, and then you've lost your chance of passing the paper. Something that as the HR examiner, I've got a couple of modules where the grade marks are quite mixed, so they're not evenly spread. If a task says it's worth 10 marks out of 100, only give it 10% of your word count. Make sure you save your word count for high value mark questions. I have a paper where there's a 30-mark question and a 10-mark question, and very often students will write pages and pages and pages and write more for the 10-mark question than for the 30-mark question. And it's such a waste, because it means that you're actually losing the opportunity to gain more marks in the higher value question. And I just want you to keep this in mind as we go through today. Assume that you have to make 1 mark-worthy point for every mark. So if it's a 10-mark question, assume you need to write 10 points that are worthy of me giving you a mark, or one of the other examiners or markers. Same with a 20-mark question, a 30-mark question. And if you think about it in that term, suddenly the allocation of your word count becomes really important. Okay, you want to have the word count to enable you to give me 30 mark-worthy points. And if you're using half of your word count on a 10-mark question, you are throwing away the opportunity to make those mark-worthy points elsewhere. So make sure you are clear on how many points are for each of the tasks. Usually they're split quite evenly, but there are a few papers where they're not. So there are some where you get 20 marks, 5 tasks, so that's easy, just split it by 5. But be very careful of how you're allocating your word count. Make sure that it's spread properly. Okay, read the question and follow instructions. The command question, the command word in the question is really important, and we will come on to that in one of the following sections. But make sure you respond to the question asked, not the one that you want to answer. Okay, don't just write around the topic. Oh, it's on, it's on management. I'll just write everything that I know about management for that question. It doesn't work like that. That's not how you score points. The questions drive the mark scheme, and the mark scheme is what we use to allocate marks to your script. So if you don't answer the question asked, we can't give you marks. You might write something that's totally brilliant, but if it's irrelevant to the question, I can't give you a mark for you. I have a paper where there was a question last time, which was tell me about your skills. And that meant your skills, you as an individual, what are your skills that you contribute for teamwork? Not skills in general. And nearly every paper was only getting 4 or 5 marks out of 20 because they were generalizing the skills and not talking about their skills. The student wasn't talking about their skills. And it's such a shame, because they were writing brilliant answers, but I couldn't allocate marks. Also, make sure you follow instructions. So if the question says no more than 8 slides for a presentation, don't do more than 8, because you won't get any marks for doing 10 or 20 or 30. You only get the marks for doing 8. It's part of the mark scheme. And make sure you stay within the framework of the question asked. You don't get marks for doing your own thing. So the questions are there for a reason, not just because we fancy writing a fancy question. They actually drive where the marks can be allocated. So read the question carefully and make sure you follow any instructions in the question. So if it says, give examples to illustrate your answer, give examples, because that's what we need to have in order to allocate marks to you. Okay, we've talked about the importance of organisational summary. I cannot emphasise enough how important applying your knowledge to your organisation is to you getting marks at ABE. Everything that we do is about you demonstrating your competence to be able to operate in your organisation. You're not doing these qualifications so you can say I've got a qualification and then not do anything with it. We want you to be able to do something with the knowledge and skills that you gain from our qualifications. That means you need to take the theories and think about how it applies to your organisation. So if you're answering a question on, for example, team dysfunction, make sure that you give me an example of conflict in your team, in your organisation, and then what happened and how you managed to fix that. Fundamentally, it's about the so what. You've read about all this stuff, you've learned about all this stuff in your lectures, and what we're interested in is not you regurgitating stuff that you've read. What we want you to demonstrate to us is that you can do something with the stuff that you've learned. So if a theory is true, how would that work in your organisation? If a framework that you've read about works, how would that work in your organisation? If you applied what you learned to your workplace setting, what difference would that make to your organisation? And that's what we want you to write about. Write about that, because that's where the marks flow really, really easily. If you start telling me about what's happening in your organisation and you pull in theory and go, well, this theory does this, and then you pull it in to your organisation, that's where you really start totting up the marks. So apply to context. Everything needs to apply to your organizational content. Don't just write generally about stuff, because you don't get good marks for that. You'll get some marks, but if you want to move through the grade levels from pass to merit to distinction level, it's all about application. That's where the big money marks are. Please avoid theory dumps. First of all, we've written the papers, and some of us, including me, have written the study guides. So assume that we know the theory. You don't need to describe the theory to us unless the question asks for that specifically. I get, whenever I write a question that's about management, fails 14 principles of management. It doesn't get you a lot of marks, and it uses up valuable word count. So for example, there was a 20-mark question on principles of management on a paper that I had in the last session. And I got paper after paper that just described this theory to me. And the most marks that I could give for a really well described paper on or answer on this theory was 6 marks out of 20. And they'd done a lovely job. It was well described and it was in their own words, but that's not where the marks are. So assume that we know the theory, so you don't need to tell us the theory. We already know it. Okay. What you want to do is take the relevant parts of the theory and apply it to your organization. So answer the question in response to the command word, but put it in your organizational context. So use the theory. Don't tell me about the theory. I already know it, as do the other examiners. Make sure, however, if you're using a theory, that you mention the theorist, the theory, and the year. So Hackman, 2002, 5-factor model. That's pretty much all I need to know about a theory that you're applying. I don't need you to describe it. I just need you to indicate that you know that you're using this theory and that you're applying it to this context. And that is where the beauty of marks start totting up really quickly. So unless a question specifically asks you to describe a theory, don't. Okay, use the theory, because otherwise you will get TD written, which means theory dump. You'll get TD written on your paper in red ink, and it's just such a waste, because you obviously know the theory and that's lovely, but I can't give you more marks for telling me what the theory is.